In a dimly lit Chicago underground club, Nathan Cross, feared Mafia boss, made a mistake that would shatter his world. He saw a fragile-looking waitress named Clara, and, for entertainment, challenged her to fight his best enforcer. The room erupted in laughter, but when Clara's eyes met his, something ancient and deadly flickered there. She accepted. What Nathan didn't know, Clara was the ghost who dismantled 3 rival syndicates alone. If you're listening to this story, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what part of the world you're listening from. The November rain hammered against the warehouse windows on Chicago's south side, each droplet catching the neon glow from the street below. Inside the velvet room, cigar smoke curled toward exposed brick walls, while jazz played low through speakers that had seen better decades. Nathan Cross sat in the corner booth, the one everyone knew belonged to him, watching his empire breathe. He was 34, broad-shouldered beneath a charcoal suit that cost more than most people earned in 6 months. His dark hair was swept back, revealing a face that women found magnetic and men found dangerous. A scar traced his left jawline, barely visible unless you knew to look for it, a reminder from his father's world, the one Nathan had inherited at 23 when a bullet made him boss. Tonight was supposed to be simple. Collections were up. The Southport deal had closed clean. Marcus, his second in command, sat across from him reviewing numbers on a tablet while Nathan nursed his 3rd whiskey. The liquor was smooth, expensive, the kind his father never got to taste. "We're clear on the waterfront," Marcus said, not looking up. He was efficient, loyal, boring in all the ways Nathan needed him to be. Rodrigo's crew backed off after last week. Nathan nodded, barely listening. His attention had snagged on the waitress weaving between tables. New girl. He hadn't seen her before. She moved like smoke, graceful but forgettable in her plain black uniform. Dark hair pulled back tight. No makeup. The kind of invisible beautiful that poverty forced on people who couldn't afford to be noticed. She reached their booth, set down 2 fresh glasses without spilling a drop, despite the jostling crowd. Her hands were small, nails clipped short and clean. When she straightened, her eyes met Nathan's for exactly 1 second, gray, like winter clouds, before dropping away. "Thanks, sweetheart," Marcus said, dismissive. She nodded and turned to leave, but Jimmy Bones, one of Nathan's enforcers, built like a refrigerator with knuckles that had broken more jaws than Nathan could count, stepped into her path. He'd been drinking since noon. "Hey, boss," Jimmy called out, loud enough to turn heads. "You see this little mouse? Bet she couldn't take a punch if her life depended on it." The conversation in nearby booths died. Nathan felt the familiar weight of expectation settle over the room. Everyone waiting to see what he'd do, how he'd react, what kind of king he'd be tonight. The girl stood very still. She didn't look scared exactly, just patient, like she'd been through this before and knew how it ended. Nathan should have shut it down, should have told Jimmy to sit down and sober up. But the whiskey was warm in his blood, and the week had been long, and sometimes being boss meant giving the men their entertainment. "What are you thinking, Jimmy?" Nathan asked, his voice carrying that quiet authority that made people lean in to hear. Jimmy grinned, showing too many teeth. "I'm thinking we should see what she's made of. Put her in the ring with Tommy. Just for fun, you know. See how long she lasts." Tommy was Jimmy's younger brother, 22, fast and mean, currently undefeated in the underground fights Nathan's organization ran every Friday. The suggestion was absurd, cruel, exactly the kind of thing that happened in places like this when powerful men got bored. Nathan looked at the girl again. She was maybe 25, thin in a way that spoke of too many skipped meals. The uniform hung loose on her frame. Everything about her screamed victim, except for her eyes. Those winter cloud eyes that hadn't flinched when Jimmy blocked her path. "What do you say, sweetheart?" Nathan heard himself ask, hating the words even as they left his mouth. "Want to make some real money? $500 if you can last 2 minutes in the ring with Tommy." The room held its breath. She looked at Nathan for a long moment, and something passed behind her gaze, some calculation he couldn't read. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear, with a Chicago accent that placed her from the Northwest neighborhoods. "Make it 1,000, she said, "and I'll do 3 minutes." The room erupted. Men laughing, slapping tables, already placing bets. Jimmy's grin stretched wider. Marcus raised an eyebrow at Nathan, the first sign of disapproval he'd shown all night. Nathan felt something shift in his chest, not quite regret, but close. Still, he nodded. Deal. What's your name? Clara, she said. Well, Clara, you just made the worst bet of your life. She smiled then, just a small upturn of her lips that didn't reach her eyes. Maybe. The crowd moved like a wave toward the back room where they held the fights. The ring was nothing fancy. A raised platform with rope boundaries, canvas stained with old blood that never quite washed out. Floodlights hung from chains above, casting harsh shadows. The smell of sweat and beer and violence thick enough to taste. Nathan took his usual seat in the front row, while Tommy stripped off his shirt, rolling his shoulders. The kid was all muscle and attitude, tattoos crawling up his arms like promises of pain. He bounced on the balls of his feet, loosening up, playing to the crowd. Clara stood on the opposite side of the ring, and Nathan watched as she removed her server's apron, folded it carefully, and set it aside. She didn't stretch, didn't warm up, just stepped through the ropes in her simple black slacks and white shirt, pushing her sleeves up to her elbows. Her forearms, Nathan noticed, were lean and corded with muscle that shouldn't have been there. This is stupid, Marcus muttered beside him. Girl's gonna get hurt. Nathan said nothing. He'd already set this in motion. All he could do now was watch it play out and hope Clara was smart enough to go down quickly, take her money, and walk away with nothing more than bruises. Jimmy rang the bell. A piece of metal pipe struck against an old ship's bell, and the fight began. Tommy moved first, cocky and fast, closing the distance with a jab meant to test her reflexes. Clara swayed backward just enough, and the punch cut through empty air. Tommy grinned, circled, threw a combination. Left, right, hook. Clara slipped each one with minimal movement, her feet barely shifting on the canvas. The crowd noise changed, laughter fading into something more focused. Nathan leaned forward. Tommy's grin disappeared. He pressed harder, throwing heavier punches, trying to corner her against the ropes. But Clara moved like water, flowing around his attacks, never where he expected her to be. 30 seconds gone. She hadn't thrown a single punch back, just evaded, studied, learned him. Come on, Mouse, Jimmy shouted. Fight back. At the 1-minute mark, Tommy committed to a heavy right hook, putting his full weight behind it. Clara stepped inside his guard, past the punch, and drove her elbow up into his solar plexus. The sound was like a mallet hitting meat. Tommy folded, gasping, and Clara's knee came up to meet his face. Blood sprayed from his nose. He stumbled backward, shocked, and she pressed forward. 3 quick punches to his ribs, precise and devastating, each one landing in the exact spot that would crack bone. The room went silent except for the rain drumming against the warehouse roof. Tommy tried to reset, raise his guard, but Clara was already moving. She swept his leg, dropped him to the canvas, and before anyone could blink, she was on him, forearm across his throat, knee pinning his chest, her whole body weight leveraged in a way that made it impossible for him to breathe, let alone move. Tap or sleep, she said quietly, so only Tommy in the front row could hear. Tommy's hand slapped the canvas frantically. 3 times, 4, 5. Jimmy rushed the ring, but Clara was already standing, backing away, hands at her sides. The whole thing had taken 90 seconds. Nathan stood slowly, his mind racing. The way she'd moved, that wasn't street fighting. That was training. Years of it. The kind of brutal efficiency you only learned in very specific, very dangerous places. Clara stepped through the ropes, picked up her apron, and looked at Nathan. I believe you owe me $1,000, Mr. Cross. Her voice was steady, not even breathing hard. Nathan pulled the money from his pocket, counted out 10 hundreds, and handed them over. Their fingers touched briefly, and he felt the calluses on her palms, fighter's hands, hidden beneath the servant's disguise. Where'd you learn to fight like that? He asked, needing to know. Clara folded the bills, tucked them into her pocket. The rain outside intensified, hammering against the windows like it was trying to break through, and in that moment, Nathan saw something in her eyes, something vast and cold and utterly merciless. I didn't learn, she said. I survived. She turned and walked toward the exit, and Nathan let her go, watching until she disappeared into the November night. The room slowly came back to life around him, men arguing over lost bets, Jimmy helping Tommy to his feet, the jazz music resuming its lazy rhythm. But Nathan stood still, his instincts screaming at him that he'd just made a terrible mistake, not in offering the fight, but in drawing the attention of whatever Clara really was. Marcus touched his shoulder. Boss? You okay? Nathan looked at the exit where she'd vanished. Rain still drumming its warning against the glass. Find out everything about her. I want to know who she is by morning. You think she's a problem? Nathan thought about the way she'd moved, the precision of her strikes, the absolute lack of fear in her eyes when she'd looked at him. He thought about the scar on his jaw, the one his father's enemies had given him, and how his father had died because he'd underestimated the wrong person. No, Nathan said quietly. I think we're her problem. The rain kept falling, washing the city clean, and somewhere in those dark Chicago streets, Clara walked alone with $1,000 in her pocket and a secret that would soon tear Nathan's world apart. The fight had been 3 minutes. The war it started would last much, much longer. Dawn broke gray over Chicago, the kind of winter morning that made you question why anyone lived this far north. Nathan hadn't slept. He'd spent the night in his penthouse office on the 40th floor of the Sinclair building. Legitimate real estate on paper, criminal empire headquarters in practice, staring at the file Marcus had delivered at 4 a.m. Clara Mendez, 26 years old, no living relatives, last known address, a shelter on the northwest side, employment history, sporadic waitressing jobs, never lasting more than 3 months, no criminal record, no social media presence, no credit cards, no bank accounts beyond a basic checking account with $347 in it. The file was too clean, too empty, like someone had erased the parts that mattered. Nathan set down his coffee, cold now, untouched for the past hour, and looked at the photograph Marcus had pulled from the restaurant's employee records. Clara stared at the camera with those winter gray eyes, her expression neutral, forgettable. But Nathan had seen what she could do. He'd watched her dismantle Tommy like a surgeon with a scalpel, precise and efficient and terrifying. You didn't learn to fight like that from YouTube videos. You learned it from survival, from necessity, from places where hesitation meant death. His phone buzzed. Marcus, talk to me, Nathan said. The girl, Clara. She's working a double shift at the Velvet Room today. Showed up at 6 a.m. for inventory like nothing happened last night. Nathan checked his watch. 7:30. Anyone giving her trouble? Opposite. Everyone's avoiding her. Word got around. Of course it did. In Nathan's world, reputation was currency, and Clara had just made a very expensive deposit. But that wasn't what bothered him. What bothered him was the question that had kept him awake all night. Why was someone who could fight like that, working for minimum wage at a mob-owned restaurant? I'm coming down, Nathan said. Don't tell her. Boss, is that? Nathan ended the call. He needed to look Clara in the eyes again, see what he'd missed the first time. Because people like her didn't just appear in his life by accident. In his experience, coincidence was just conspiracy you hadn't figured out yet. The Velvet Room looked different in daylight. The neon seduction of the night shift gave way to harsh reality. Scuffed floors, water-stained ceiling tiles, the lingering smell of cigarettes and spilled beer. Clara was behind the bar, taking inventory of liquor bottles with a clipboard, her movements methodical and unhurried. She'd braided her dark hair back, no makeup still. The server uniform was the same as last night, but Nathan noticed the way she'd positioned herself with her back to the corner, how she'd angled the bar mirror so she could see both entrances without turning around. Old habits. Military habits, maybe. Or something worse. Nathan walked in alone. He'd left Marcus at the office, left his security detail in the car. This conversation needed to be just the two of them. Clara saw him in the mirror but didn't turn around, just kept counting bottles of gin, marking numbers on her clipboard. We're closed, she said. I own the place, Nathan replied, pulling out a bar stool and sitting down. I'm always open. She set down the clipboard then, turned to face him. In the morning light streaming through the dirty windows, she looked younger somehow, tired. The kind of tired that lived in your bones and never went away no matter how much you slept. You want your money back? She asked. Because I earned it. You did, Nathan agreed. That's not why I'm here. Then why? Nathan leaned forward, elbows on the bar. Because people who fight like you don't end up serving drinks in South Side dives. So either you're running from something, or you're hiding from something, and I need to know which one before it becomes my problem. Clara studied him for a long moment. Then she moved to the coffee maker behind the bar, poured 2 cups, and slid one across to Nathan. The gesture was oddly domestic, intimate in a way that didn't match the violence she'd shown last night. I'm not anyone's problem, she said. I'm just trying to survive. By pretending to be weak? By working jobs that pay nothing? Nathan sipped the coffee. Surprisingly good. Better than his office brew. That's not survival. That's hiding. Maybe hiding is how I survive. Nathan set down his cup. Who are you hiding from, Clara? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to the window, looked out at the street where early morning traffic was starting to build. A city bus rumbled past, carrying people to jobs they hated. A homeless man pushed a shopping cart full of his life's possessions. Chicago, in all its gray, grinding reality. You ever hear about what happened in Milwaukee 3 years ago? Clara asked quietly. The Volkov Syndicate? Nathan's spine straightened. Everyone in the Midwest crime world knew that story. The Volkovs had been major players. Drugs, guns, human trafficking, brutal and efficient and untouchable. Until someone had systematically dismantled their entire operation over the course of 6 weeks. Safe houses burned. Lieutenants disappeared. The boss, Viktor Volkov himself, found dead in his fortified compound with a single knife wound to the heart. The FBI had investigated for months. Found nothing. No witnesses, no evidence, no suspects. It was like a ghost had done it. They said it was a rival organization. Nathan said slowly. An inside war. Clara turned from the window. That's what they said. Understanding hit Nathan like a freight train. You. She didn't confirm it. Didn't deny it. Just looked at him with those winter-gray eyes that had seen things Nathan couldn't imagine. Viktor Volkov trafficked my little sister, Clara said, her voice flat and emotionless in the way of people who'd burned through all their feelings and had nothing left. Took her from our foster home when she was 14. I was 18, just enlisted in the Marines, stationed overseas. By the time I found out, she was already gone, dead, used up and thrown away like garbage. The coffee in Nathan's stomach turned to acid. Clara, I spent 8 years learning, she continued, still in that same dead voice. Marine recon, hand-to-hand combat instructor, then private military contracts in places where the rules don't apply. I learned to track, to kill, to disappear. And then I came back, and I found everyone who'd touched her, starting from the bottom and working my way up to Viktor. 3 years ago, Nathan said. 3 years ago. Clara moved back to the bar, picked up her coffee, didn't drink it, and then I disappeared, changed my name. Clara Mendez isn't real, and became invisible. Because the people Viktor worked with, his suppliers, his partners, they're still looking for whoever killed him, and they'll never stop looking. Nathan's mind raced. The implications were staggering. The woman standing across from him had single-handedly destroyed one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the Midwest. She was a weapon, honed and tested, and more dangerous than anyone in Nathan's crew. Why tell me this? He asked. Clara met his eyes. Because you asked. Because you seem like someone who understands that some debts can only be paid in blood. And because she hesitated for the first time, vulnerability flashing across her face. Because I'm tired of being invisible. I'm tired of hiding, but I don't know how to be anything else anymore. The moment stretched between them, heavy with confession and consequence. Outside, the rain started again, softer now, a persistent drizzle that matched the gray sky. Nathan should have been afraid, should have kicked her out, distanced himself from someone the Volkov Syndicate's remaining allies wanted dead. But instead, he felt something else. Recognition. He'd inherited his empire through violence. He'd held it through fear and force and calculated brutality, but he'd never done what Clara had done. He'd never walked into hell alone and come out the other side with his enemy's head. The people looking for you, Nathan said. You think they've found you? Clara's jaw tightened. Not yet, but they will eventually. They always do. Nathan made a decision that would change everything. What if they didn't? What if you stopped hiding and started existing under protection? Your protection? Clara laughed. But there was no humor in it. Mr. Cross, I've seen your operation. It's impressive. But the people hunting me aren't street thugs. They're international, ruthless. They'll burn everything you have to get to me. Let them try, Nathan said, surprised by the conviction in his own voice. I've been building this empire for 11 years. I didn't get here by backing down from threats. This isn't your fight. Maybe not. But you made it interesting last night. Nathan stood, came around the bar until only 3 feet separated them. Here's what I'm offering. Legitimate work. Better pay. A place in my organization that uses your skills without destroying you. And if the people hunting you show up, we deal with them together. Clara stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Why would you do that? Nathan thought about his father. about inheriting this life at 23, about all the years of violence and loneliness, and never trusting anyone because trust got you killed. He thought about Clara dismantling Tommy with surgical precision, and how something in her eyes had called to something in him, recognition between two people who'd paid too high a price for their survival. Because everyone deserves at least one person in their corner, Nathan said. And because I think you and I understand each other in ways that normal people never could. The rain drummed against the windows. Steam rose from their forgotten coffee cups. Clara's expression shifted through a dozen emotions Nathan couldn't name. If I say yes, she finally said, and they come for me, a lot of people are going to die. Your people. Then we'll make sure they die first. Clara closed her eyes, and Nathan saw the war happening inside her. The need to stay hidden versus the desperate desire to stop running, to exist, to be human again instead of a ghost. When she opened her eyes, they were wet. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Nathan extended his hand. Clara looked at it for a long moment, then took it. Her grip was firm, calloused, the handshake of a soldier sealing a pact. Neither of them knew it yet, but in that moment, they'd just changed the course of both their lives. Nathan had offered sanctuary to a ghost. Clara had stepped out of the shadows and into the light, and somewhere in the cold machinery of the international underworld, the people hunting Clara were about to discover that she wasn't hiding alone anymore. She had an army now, and its king was a man who'd never learned how to lose. The rain kept falling on Chicago, washing away the old world and making space for something new, something dangerous, something that looked a lot like hope, wrapped in violence, and sealed with a handshake between two people who'd forgotten what hope felt like. 3 weeks passed before the first bodies showed up. Nathan had moved Clara into a secured apartment in the Sinclair building, 3 floors below his own penthouse. He'd assigned Marcus to train her on the organization's operations, the legitimate real estate holdings, the less legitimate protection rackets, the underground economy that kept Chicago's criminal machinery well-oiled and profitable. Clara learned fast, too fast. Within days, she was identifying inefficiencies in their supply chains, suggesting tactical improvements to their security protocols, reading people and situations with the kind of instinct you couldn't teach. She was also, Nathan discovered, profoundly isolated. She ate meals alone, worked alone, spoke only when necessary. The other members of Nathan's crew treated her with cautious respect, but nobody got close. The story of what she'd done to Tommy had evolved in the retelling. Some versions had her killing him. Others had her being some kind of government assassin. Nathan knew the truth was both simpler and more complicated. Clara was a weapon, yes, but she was also a broken person trying to figure out how to be whole again. He started having dinner with her. Not every night, but often enough that it became routine. They'd sit in his office or her apartment, eating takeout from the Italian place on Grand Avenue, talking about everything except the violence that defined their lives. He learned she liked old movies, noir films from the 40s and 50s, where everyone wore hats and smoked too much and nobody got a happy ending. He learned she'd wanted to be a teacher before the Marines, before her sister, before everything went to hell. He learned she had nightmares bad enough that she only slept 3 or 4 hours a night. She learned he'd never wanted this life, that his father had forced him into it by dying too young and leaving Nathan with impossible choices. She learned he collected first edition books, kept them in a locked cabinet in his bedroom, and read poetry when the weight of being boss got too heavy. She learned that underneath the expensive suits and calculated cruelty was a man who'd forgotten how to be anything except what everyone else needed him to be. They were becoming something, Nathan and Clara. Not friends, exactly. Not lovers. Not yet. But partners in the way soldiers are partners, where you trust the person next to you with your life, because you don't have another choice. And then the Volkov Syndicate's allies found her. It started with a phone call at 3 a.m. Marcus, his voice tight with stress. Boss, we've got a situation. The safe house on Ashland. Someone hit it. Professional. Nathan was dressed and moving in under 2 minutes. Clara emerged from her apartment at the same time, already in tactical black, a knife strapped to her thigh. She looked at him, and he saw the ghost he'd first glimpsed that night at the Velvet Room. Cold, focused, lethal. It's them, she said. Not a question. We don't know that yet. It's them. They took Nathan's armored Mercedes, Marcus driving while Nathan pulled up security footage on his tablet. The Ashland safe house was a nondescript 2-story in a working-class neighborhood, used to store product and occasionally hide people who needed to disappear for a while. 6 of Nathan's men stationed there permanently. The footage showed the attack happening at 2:47 a.m. 4 figures in black tactical gear, moving with military precision. They'd bypassed the alarm system, cut the power, and eliminated all 6 guards in under 3 minutes. No shots fired, just knives and silence and brutal efficiency. Jesus, Marcus breathed. Who are these people? Nathan glanced at Clara. She was staring at the tablet screen. Her jaw clenched so tight he could see the muscle jumping. Bratva, she said quietly. Russian organized crime. Viktor Volkov's people. That's their signature. No guns, maximum intimidation. They want me to know they're here. How did they find you? Nathan demanded. I don't know. I've been careful. But they have resources I can't match. Informants, surveillance, money to buy information from places I can't even access. Clara looked at him, and her eyes were full of bitter resignation. I told you this would happen. I told you they'd come. Yeah, you did. Nathan closed the tablet. And I told you we'd deal with them together. They arrived at the safe house to find it swarming with police, not cops Nathan owned, which meant someone had called it in anonymously, probably the killers themselves. Another message. We can operate in your territory and you can't do anything about it. Nathan stayed in the car while Marcus went to supervise, playing the concerned property owner discovering a break-in. But Nathan's attention was on Clara, who sat utterly still in the back seat, her breathing controlled, her eyes tracking every person and vehicle on the street. You're planning something, Nathan said. Don't. They killed 6 of your people to send me a message. Clara replied, her voice flat. If I don't respond, they'll escalate. They'll hit harder next time, kill more, until you give me up or I come out of hiding. So we prepare. We harden our defenses. No. Clara turned to look at him, and Nathan saw the ghost fully now, the killer who destroyed the Volkov syndicate. This is what I do, Nathan. This is what I'm good at. They came into your city hunting me. I'm going to teach them why that was a mistake. Nathan's instinct was to forbid it, to lock Clara in a secure location, and handle this himself. But he'd built his empire by knowing when to trust his people's expertise. And Clara's expertise was in exactly this kind of war. Tell me the plan, he said. Clara smiled, and it was terrifying. They sent 4 soldiers. That means they've got a command structure here. Someone coordinating, providing intel, managing logistics. We find the head, cut it off, and send it back to Moscow in a box. And how do we find them? We don't. We make them find us. Clara pulled out her phone, started typing. I'm going to walk into their surveillance net and let them see me. They'll send more soldiers. I'll let them get close, then take them apart. Eventually, they'll escalate to sending someone senior. That's when we grab him. Marcus returned to the car, his expression grim. All 6 dead. Cause of death looks like bladed weapons, precise kills. Coroner's preliminary says they never saw it coming. Professional, Nathan said. Very. Marcus looked at Clara. You know who did this? Yeah, Clara said. The people I've been hiding from. And now I'm going to make them wish they'd never found me. The trap was set at the abandoned warehouse district near the port of Chicago. Clara walked in alone, wearing civilian clothes, carrying nothing but her phone. Nathan watched from a command center Marcus had set up 2 blocks away, a dozen security cameras giving them eyes on the entire area. This is insane, Marcus muttered. She's one person. She's not, Nathan replied. She's a ghost, and ghosts don't die easy. 20 minutes after Clara entered the warehouse, 3 black SUVs rolled up. 12 men emerged, all carrying weapons, moving in tactical formation. They surrounded the warehouse, breached from 2 entry points, and disappeared inside. The cameras inside the warehouse went dark one by one. Clara had disabled them herself, wanting no witnesses to what was about to happen. Nathan's hands clenched into fists as he stared at blank screens and waited. 7 minutes of silence. Then gunfire. 3 quick bursts, followed by screams. Marcus reached for his weapon, but Nathan stopped him. Wait. More screams. The sound of something heavy falling. Breaking glass. A man yelling in Russian, the words cut off mid-sentence. Then silence. 5 minutes later, Clara walked out of the warehouse. Her clothes were splattered with blood that wasn't hers. She carried a phone in one hand, not her own, taken from one of the attackers. She looked directly at the hidden camera where Nathan was watching, and nodded once. 12 men had gone into that warehouse. None of them came out alive. Nathan met Clara at her apartment an hour later. She'd showered and changed. but he could still see the darkness in her eyes, the weight of what she'd done settling over her like a shroud. There were 12 of them, Nathan said quietly. 13, Clara corrected, sitting down heavily on her couch. One ran. I let him. He'll report back that I'm not alone anymore, that I'm protected. They'll need to send someone higher up the chain. Clara, you just killed 12 men by yourself. She looked at him, and her eyes were ancient and sad. I've killed a lot more than that, Nathan. Viktor Volkov's organization had 83 members when I started. By the time I was done, they were all dead. 12 is nothing. Nathan sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. This is eating you alive. I know. Then stop. Let me handle this my way. We can... No. Clara turned to face him fully. You don't understand. These people, the Bratva, they don't negotiate. They don't compromise. They see weakness. They exploit it. The only language they speak is violence, and I'm fluent in it in ways you're not. I've done plenty of violence. Business violence, Clara said. Calculated. Strategic. This is different. This is existential. They want me dead so badly they'll burn your entire organization to get to me. The only way to stop them is to make the cost too high, to hurt them so badly they decide I'm not worth it. Nathan understood then what Clara was offering. Not just protection for herself, but a war she'd wage on his behalf, using her particular set of skills to eliminate a threat he couldn't touch. It was pragmatic and brutal, and exactly the kind of calculus his father would have made. But his father had died alone and unloved, a king with an empire and no one to share it with. There's another way, Nathan said slowly. What if we don't just hurt them? What if we expose them? Clara frowned. What? The Bratva operates in shadow. They're powerful because nobody can touch them, can't trace them, can't prove anything. But you took a phone from one of those men tonight. Phones have data, contacts, messages. What if we give that to the FBI? The FBI? Clara looked at him like he'd suggested praying to the moon. You want to involve federal law enforcement in a mob war? I want to make this someone else's problem, Nathan clarified. You burn the Bratva with evidence. The FBI comes down on them hard. Arrests, indictments, asset seizures. They'll be too busy defending themselves to come after you. Clara was quiet for a long moment, thinking it through. That could work, she admitted, but it means giving up intelligence, potentially compromising some of your own operations. I'll survive. I always do. Nathan stood, offered Clara his hand. Come on, let's crack that phone and see what kind of hell we can unleash. Clara took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. They stood close, and Nathan realized this was the first time he'd touched her since that handshake 3 weeks ago. Her hand was warm in his, calloused and strong and real. Thank you, Clara said softly, for not treating me like a monster. You're not a monster, Nathan replied. You're just someone who had to become one to survive. There's a difference. Is there? Yeah. Nathan squeezed her hand gently. Monsters enjoy it. You do it because you have to. That makes you a soldier, not a monster. Clara's eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. I haven't felt like a soldier in a long time. I've just felt lost. Then let's find you, Nathan said. Together. After we burn the Bratva to the ground. She smiled then, real and genuine, and Nathan felt something shift in his chest. Something dangerous and terrifying and a lot like hope. They spent the rest of the night breaking into the dead man's phone, extracting data, building a case that would tear the Bratva's American operations apart. And with every piece of evidence they compiled, every connection they made, Nathan felt the web around Clara loosening. She'd come to him as a ghost. Maybe, just maybe, he could help her become human again. The rain had stopped outside. Dawn was coming, gray and cold, and new. And for the first time in years, both Nathan and Clara looked at the light and didn't flinch away. The FBI took the bait exactly as Nathan had calculated. The phone Clara had taken contained enough evidence to light up every federal law enforcement agency from Chicago to Moscow. Names, bank accounts, shipping manifests, photographs of meetings between Bratva leaders and corrupt politicians. Within 72 hours, the news networks were running stories about the largest coordinated strike against Russian organized crime in U.S. history, 18 arrests in 6 cities, asset seizures totaling $200 million, 3 federal judges issuing RICO indictments. Nathan watched it unfold from his office while Clara paced like a caged animal, unable to sit still, her body humming with nervous energy. "They'll know it was me," she said for the 10th time. "They'll know I gave up that intelligence." "Let them know," Nathan replied, eyes on the Bloomberg terminal showing Bratva Front Company's stock prices cratering. "You wanted to hurt them. This is how you hurt them in ways they can't recover from. Money they can replace. This just makes them angrier." Nathan turned from the screen to look at her. "Clara, they were already going to kill you. Making them angry doesn't change anything except that now they're also busy with federal prosecutors. That buys us time." "Time for what?" "To figure out what comes next. To build you a life that isn't just survival." Clara stopped pacing, looked at him with an expression somewhere between hope and disbelief. "You actually think that's possible? After everything I've done?" Nathan stood, crossed to where she stood by the window overlooking Chicago's skyline. The city spread out below them, millions of people living their ordinary lives, unaware of the war being waged in the shadows. "I think," Nathan said carefully, "that you've spent so long being a weapon that you've forgotten you were a person first. But I see it, the way you cry during old movies when you think I'm not looking, the way you save that stray cat that hangs around the loading dock, the way you smile when Marcus tells his terrible jokes. You're still in there, Clara. You're just buried under a lot of trauma and violence." Her eyes glistened. "What if the weapon is all that's left? What if I broke myself so completely when I killed Victor that there's no putting me back together?" Nathan took a risk. He reached out and touched her face, his palm cupping her cheek, thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't meant to let fall. "Then we'll build something new. Not who you were, not the weapon you became, but someone in between. Someone who gets to decide what she wants instead of just reacting to what the world demands." Clara leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. "I don't know how to do that." "Neither do I," Nathan admitted, "but maybe we can figure it out together." The moment stretched between them, intimate and fragile. Nathan was acutely aware of how close they were standing, how her breath stirred against his wrist, how badly he wanted to close the distance and kiss her. But something held him back, the recognition that Clara was vulnerable right now, that she needed a friend more than she needed a lover, that if he pushed too hard too fast he'd shatter whatever trust they'd built. So instead, he pulled back, let his hand fall away, and offered her something safer. "Come on, let's get out of this building. When's the last time you did something normal?" Clara opened her eyes, confused. "Normal? Yeah, like, I don't know, go to a museum, see a movie, eat at a restaurant where nobody's trying to kill anyone." "Nathan, we're in the middle of a war, which is exactly why we need to take a breath and remember we're human." Nathan grabbed his coat. "Marcus has the security situation locked down. The Bratva is scrambling. We've got maybe a week before they regroup and make another move. So let's use it. Let's be normal for 6 hours and see what happens." Clara stared at him like he'd lost his mind. But then something shifted in her expression. Curiosity, maybe, or desperate longing for something other than violence. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay, let's be normal." They went to the Art Institute of Chicago. Nathan hadn't been in years, not since before his father died, when he'd sometimes skip school and spend afternoons wandering the galleries. Clara moved through the rooms like someone discovering color after living in grayscale, stopping in front of paintings and staring at them with an intensity that made other museum visitors give her space. In front of Edward Hopper's Nighthawks, she stood for almost 10 minutes, silent and still. "What do you see?" Nathan asked quietly, standing beside her. "Loneliness," Clara replied. "Everyone in that diner is together but separate, close but isolated, like they're all carrying something too heavy to share." Nathan looked at the painting with new eyes. Yeah, I see that. "Do you ever feel like that?" Clara asked. "Like you're surrounded by people but fundamentally alone?" Nathan thought about his organization, the hundreds of people who worked for him, depended on him, feared him. He thought about the women he'd dated over the years, relationships that never went anywhere because he could never fully trust anyone with the weight of who he really was. "Every day," he admitted. Clara turned to look at him. "Not anymore, though, right? Now you have this, us, whatever we're doing." "Whatever we're doing," Nathan echoed, and found himself smiling. "Yeah, now I have this." They had lunch at a small cafe in Millennium Park, sitting outside despite the November cold, watching tourists take selfies at the Cloudgate sculpture. Clara ordered a grilled cheese sandwich and tomato soup, and Nathan found himself charmed by how carefully she ate, savoring each bite like she couldn't quite believe the food was real. When's the last time you let yourself just be? Nathan asked. Clara thought about it. Honestly, before the Marines. Maybe when I was 16, 17, before my sister, before everything went wrong. She looked at him over her soup. What about you? College, maybe. I had 2 years at Northwestern before my dad got killed and I had to take over. I was studying literature, of all things. Was going to be a professor, write books about dead poets. That's a hell of a left turn to mob boss. Nathan laughed, bitter and genuine at the same time. Yeah, but you don't get to choose. The Empire chooses you, and you either step up or you watch everything your family built collapse. So I stepped up. Do you regret it? Sometimes, when I'm reading Yeats at 3 a.m. and pretending I'm someone else. Nathan met her eyes. But then I think about the people who depend on me, the order I maintain, the worse alternatives if I wasn't here. And I think, maybe this is who I was always supposed to be, the monster holding back bigger monsters. Clara's expression softened. You're not a monster, Nathan. You're just a man trying to do right in a world that doesn't reward it. Coming from you, that actually means something. They spent the afternoon walking through the city, not talking much, just existing together in comfortable silence. Nathan showed her places he'd loved as a kid, the bookstore on State Street where he'd discovered Hemingway, the bridge over the Chicago River where he'd scattered his mother's ashes after she died when he was 12. Clara showed him nothing, because she had no history here, no roots, no place that meant anything. She was a ghost in every sense, untethered and floating. But as they walked, Nathan saw her start to relax, her shoulders dropping, her pace slowing, like maybe Chicago could become hers if she let it. Evening found them at Navy Pier, watching the sun set over Lake Michigan. The sky turned orange and purple and gold, reflected in the water, beautiful enough to hurt. Thank you for today, Clara said softly. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be just a person. You're always a person, Clara, even when you're being a weapon. She looked at him, and Nathan saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen before. Possibility. Hope. The tentative belief that maybe, just maybe, she could have something more than survival. And then her phone rang. Clara answered, her face going pale. She listened for 30 seconds, said nothing, and ended the call. What is it? Nathan asked, dread already pooling in his stomach. That was Marcus. They found him. Victor Volkov's brother, Alexei. He's in Chicago, and he's asking for a meeting. The sunset suddenly felt less beautiful, and more like a warning. The brief window of normalcy was over. The war was about to reach its breaking point. Do we take the meeting? Nathan asked. Clara's expression hardened back into the ghost. We take it, but we end it. Tonight. Alexei Volkov is the one person with the authority to call off the hunt. If we eliminate him, this is over. Or it gets much worse. It can't get much worse than living like this forever. Clara turned away from the lake, back toward the city that would soon run red with blood. Set it up. Neutral ground. Public place. And Nathan. Yeah? If this goes wrong, if I don't make it out, I need you to know. She stopped, struggling with words. I need you to know that these last 3 weeks have been the most human I've felt in years. So thank you for seeing me, for not flinching away. Nathan's chest tightened. Clara, just set up the meeting. She walked away, and Nathan stood alone by the lake as darkness fell over Chicago. The water lapped at the pier, indifferent to human drama. Somewhere in the city, Alexei Volkov was planning his next move, and somewhere inside Nathan's chest, something that felt dangerously close to love was trying to claw its way out. He pulled out his phone and called Marcus. Set up the meeting. Tomorrow night. Grand Avenue. The old cannery building. Tell Volkov we'll talk terms. Boss, is this smart? Nathan thought about Clara's eyes when she'd thanked him. He thought about the way she'd looked at the Hopper painting, seeing herself in those isolated figures. He thought about all the ways a person could be destroyed, and all the ways they might be saved. No, Nathan said, but we're doing it anyway. The line went dead. The lake kept moving. And Nathan Cross, king of the Chicago underworld, stood in the gathering darkness and prepared for the fight that would determine whether Clara Mendez got to be human again, or died trying. The old cannery building on Grand Avenue had been abandoned for 15 years, its broken windows and rust-stained walls a monument to Chicago's industrial past. Nathan had chosen it specifically because of what it represented, something that looked dead but still held power, still mattered in the city's bones, like him, like Clara. The meeting was set for midnight. Nathan arrived at 11 with Marcus and 12 of his best people, all armed, all positioned strategically throughout the building. Clara came separately, dressed in black tactical gear, her face a mask of cold focus. "You don't have to be here," Nathan told her, as they did a final weapons check in what had once been the building's main floor. Moonlight streamed through broken skylights, casting shadows that moved like ghosts. "Yes, I do," Clara replied, checking the magazine on her Glock. "Alexei Volkov wants me. If I don't show, he'll know it's a trap. It is a trap. A trap he expects. But he'll still come because his ego won't let him believe we're good enough to catch him." Clara holstered the gun. "The Volkov family thinks they're untouchable. I already proved that wrong with Victor. Tonight, I'm going to finish the lesson." Nathan wanted to argue, to lock her away somewhere safe and handle this himself, but he'd learned over the past weeks that Clara wasn't someone you protected. She was someone you fought beside. So instead, he checked his own weapon and nodded. "Okay, but we do this smart. The second things go sideways, we extract. I don't care about killing Alexei if it means losing you." Clara looked at him, and something soft flickered in her expression. "Since when did I become worth more than the mission?" "Since the first time you smiled at one of Marcus's jokes," Nathan replied. "Since I watched you cry during Casablanca. Since I realized that saving you means more to me than winning." The words hung in the cold air between them. Clara stepped closer, and Nathan's breath caught. She reached up, touched his face the same way he'd touched hers days before, her palm warm against his cheek. "If we survive tonight," she said softly, "remind me to tell you something important. Tell me now. No, after, when we've earned it." Before Nathan could respond, Marcus's voice crackled through their earpieces. "We've got movement. 4 vehicles approaching from the north." Clara stepped back, and the softness disappeared, replaced by the cold precision of the weapon she'd become. "Positions," she said. And even though Nathan was technically in charge, everyone moved to obey. Alexei Volkov walked into the cannery like he owned it. He was in his mid-50s, tall and lean with silver hair, and the kind of face that belonged in an art museum. Classical, aristocratic, cruel. 6 men flanked him, all carrying assault rifles, all moving with military discipline. Nathan stood in the center of the room with Clara beside him, and Marcus at his back. The distance between the two groups was maybe 30 feet. Close enough to talk, far enough to react if things went bad. "Nathan Cross," Alexei said, his English perfect but accented. "The Chicago Prince. You've been making my life very difficult." "Your people killed 6 of mine," Nathan replied evenly. "That made my life difficult first." Alexei smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "A misunderstanding. We were simply looking for something that belongs to us." His gaze shifted to Clara. "Hello, Ghost. I've been wanting to meet you for a very long time." Clara said nothing, her expression unreadable. "You killed my brother," Alexei continued, his voice conversational, like they were discussing the weather. "Dismantled his entire organization. Very impressive. Victor always underestimated women. Fatal flaw." "He had a lot of fatal flaws," Clara said. "Being a monster was the biggest one." "Monster?" Alexei laughed. "Sweetheart, we're all monsters here. The only difference is, some of us embrace it, and some of us pretend otherwise." He looked at Nathan. "Tell me, Prince, do you know what she is? The woman you're protecting?" "I know enough. Do you know she killed 83 people? Do you know some of them begged, and she did it anyway? Do you know she burned down a building with 7 men locked inside and listened to them scream?" Nathan had known the broad strokes, but hearing the details made something twist in his gut. Not revulsion, exactly. More like recognition of just how far Clara had gone, how much of herself she'd sacrificed for vengeance. "I know," Nathan said quietly, "that your brother trafficked children. I know he destroyed families. I know the world is better with him dead. So whatever Clara had to become to kill him, that's on Victor, not her." Something flickered in Clara's expression. Surprise, gratitude, pain. Alexei's smile faded. "You're more interesting than I expected, Prince. Which makes this harder. I came here tonight to offer a deal." "What kind of deal?" "Give me the Ghost. Let me take her back to Moscow to face justice for Victor's death. In exchange, I'll pull my resources out of Chicago, and you'll never hear from us again." "Justice," Clara spat. "You mean torture and execution." "Semantics," Alexei said with a shrug. "The point is, this ends. Your city is safe. Your people live. All it costs is one woman who's already dead inside anyway. Nathan felt Clara tense beside him. For a brief, terrible moment, he wondered if she was considering it, sacrificing herself to protect him, his organization, the tentative life she'd started building. No, Nathan said firmly. Clara stays with me. Find another deal. Alexei's expression hardened. There is no other deal. Victor was my baby brother. Blood demands blood. Give me the ghost, or I'll take her, and I'll burn everything you have to do it. You can try. The tension in the room spiked, everyone's hand drifting toward weapons. Nathan could feel the violence gathering, inevitable as a storm, and he knew that whatever happened in the next 60 seconds would determine whether he and Clara walked out of this building alive. And then Clara did something unexpected. She stepped forward, away from Nathan, toward Alexei. Wait, she said. I'll make you a different deal. Nathan grabbed her arm. Clara, what are you doing? She pulled free, kept walking until she was only 10 feet from Alexei. You want me to pay for Victor's death? Fine. Let's settle this the old way. You and me, hand to hand. No weapons, no backup. If you win, you take me. If I win, you leave Chicago and never come back. Alexei laughed. You think I'm stupid enough to fight you myself after what you did to my brother's people? I think you're arrogant enough to believe you can beat me. I think your ego demands it. And I think you know that if you just try to take me by force, a lot of your men are going to die. This way is cleaner. Clara tilted her head. Unless you're scared. The taunt worked. Nathan saw Alexei's jaw clench, saw the pride and anger flash in his eyes. Men like him didn't accept challenges to their strength, especially not from women. Fine, Alexei said, already shrugging off his coat. Let's see what the ghost is made of. Clara, don't, Nathan said urgently. This is insane. She turned back to look at him, and her eyes were clear and calm. Trust me. I've been fighting my whole life. I know what I'm doing. That's not... Trust me, Nathan. He did. God help him. He did. Nathan stepped back, and Marcus moved the rest of Nathan's people to the perimeter, creating a circle. Alexei's men did the same. In the center of that circle, Clara and Alexei faced each other. Alexei was bigger, stronger, with reach and weight advantages. But Clara moved like water, and Nathan had seen what she could do. They circled each other, and Alexei struck first. A fast jab meant to test her reactions. Clara slipped it, countered with a low kick to his thigh that made him grunt. He pressed forward, throwing combinations, trying to use his size to overwhelm her. Clara gave ground, letting him advance, studying his rhythm. Then she exploded forward, ducking under a right hook and driving her shoulder into his ribs. Nathan heard something crack. Alexei stumbled back, surprise flashing across his face. Victor thought he was invincible too, Clara said, her voice carrying across the silent room. Right up until I put a knife in his heart. Rage transformed Alexei. He charged, abandoning technique for raw violence. Clara met him head-on, and the two of them collided in a fury of strikes and blocks and desperate, brutal efficiency. Alexei got through her guard, landed a heavy punch to her ribs that drove the air from her lungs. Clara took it, used the momentum to spin and drive her elbow into his temple. Blood sprayed from Alexei's nose. They broke apart, both breathing hard, both bleeding. Nathan's hands were clenched into fists, every instinct screaming at him to intervene, to protect Clara. But he forced himself to stay still. This was her fight, her choice. You can't win, Alexei panted. I've been doing this since before you were born. Then you've had a lot more time to get slow, Clara replied. She moved again, faster this time, landing 3 strikes before Alexei could react. Solar plexus, throat, knee. He folded, gasping, and Clara swept his legs out from under him. Alexei hit the concrete hard, and Clara was on him instantly, forearm across his throat, knee pinning his chest. The same position she'd used on Tommy that first night. The position that said, with absolute clarity, I own you. Tap or die, Clara said. Alexei's hand slapped the concrete once, twice. His face was purple, oxygen-starved, eyes bulging. Clara held the position for 5 more seconds, long enough to make her point, short enough not to kill him, then released and stood up. She looked down at Alexei, who was coughing and gasping on the ground. Your brother died badly, Clara said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. He cried, he begged, and I killed him anyway. Because that's what monsters deserve. You want to end up like him? Keep coming after me. But if you're smart, you'll take this loss and go home and tell everyone in Moscow that the ghost is off limits. Because next time, I won't stop at choking you out. I'll carve Victor's name into your chest and send you back in pieces. Silence. Total, absolute silence. Then, slowly, Alexei pushed himself to his feet. Blood ran from his nose and Nathan could see the shame and fury in his eyes. But underneath that, something else. Respect, maybe, or recognition of a superior predator. You're right, Alexei said hoarsely. Victor underestimated you. I won't make the same mistake. He looked at Nathan. Chicago is yours, Prince, and the ghost is yours. But know this, my family has a long memory. Someday, somehow, there will be a reckoning. Let it come, Nathan said. We'll be ready. Alexei gestured to his men, and they retreated, backing out of the building with their weapons still trained on Nathan's people. Nathan waited until he heard the vehicle start and drive away before rushing to Clara. She collapsed into his arms, shaking with adrenaline and pain. Did it work? She asked. Did I sell it? You sold it, Nathan confirmed, holding her close. Jesus Christ, Clara, you terrified me. Good. I was terrified too. She pulled back enough to look at him, and her eyes were wet. I meant what I said earlier. I have something to tell you. Tell me. I love you, Clara said, the words simple and devastating. I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you offered me protection. Maybe when you held my hand at the museum. Maybe in 1,000 small moments I didn't recognize at the time. But I love you, Nathan Cross, and I needed you to know before something happens, and I never get the chance. Nathan's world tilted. He'd been preparing for violence, for death, for every outcome except this. Clara offering him her heart in the wreckage of a fight, blood on her face and hope in her eyes. I love you too, he said, and the words felt like confession, like surrender, like the most dangerous thing he'd ever said. I didn't want to. You're complicated and broken and a magnet for violence, but I love you anyway. Maybe because of those things, not despite them. Clara laughed, breathless and genuine. We're quite a pair. Yeah, we are. Nathan kissed her then, in the abandoned cannery with his people watching, and the taste of blood on both their lips. It wasn't gentle or romantic. It was desperate and real and perfect in its imperfection. When they broke apart, Marcus was standing nearby, looking uncomfortable. Boss, we should go. No guarantee Volkov doesn't change his mind and come back with reinforcements. Nathan nodded, but his eyes stayed on Clara. Can you walk? I can do more than walk. I can run if I have to. Let's save running for another day. Nathan kept his arm around her as they moved toward the exit, his people falling into protective formation around them. Outside, Chicago sparkled under a cold sky, indifferent to the drama that had just unfolded. But for Nathan and Clara, everything had changed. The ghost had stopped running. The prince had found something worth more than his empire, and together, they'd won a victory that looked a lot like freedom. The war wasn't over. Alexei's parting words had made that clear, but it had been postponed, pushed back, given breathing room. And in that room, Nathan and Clara could finally figure out how to be more than survivors. They could learn to live. 6 months later, spring arrived in Chicago with all the subtle grace of a jazz solo, unexpected warmth breaking through winter's grip, green pushing through concrete, the city remembering how to bloom. Nathan stood on his penthouse balcony, watching the sunrise paint the skyline in shades of gold and pink, and allowed himself something he rarely did: contentment. Behind him, the glass door slid open, and Clara stepped out, wrapped in one of his shirts, 2 cups of coffee in her hands. She'd let her hair grow out, stopped pulling it back so severely. Small changes, but Nathan saw them as victories, signs that she was learning to exist instead of just survive. You're up early, she said, handing him a cup. Couldn't sleep. Too much thinking. About how different everything looks now versus 6 months ago. Nathan took a sip. Perfect. The way Clara always made it. Somehow knowing exactly how much cream and sugar he needed. About how I'm not sure I recognize my own life anymore. Clara leaned against the railing beside him. Good different? Or bad different? Terrifying different, Nathan admitted. I've spent my entire adult life being one thing. Boss, king, the man everyone answers to. But with you, I'm just Nathan, and I don't know how to be him anymore. You're doing fine. Am I? Nathan looked at her. This woman who'd walked into his life as a ghost and become the most real thing he had. Clara, I'm in love with you. Completely. Irrationally in love with you. And that makes me weak. It gives people leverage. In my world, love is a liability. Clara set down her coffee and took his hand, intertwining their fingers. In your world, maybe. But what if we're building a different world? One where love isn't weakness but strength. That's a nice idea. But reality doesn't work that way, doesn't it? Clara squeezed his hand. 6 months ago, I was alone, hunted, waiting to die. Now I have you, Marcus, a place I call home. I train your people in hand-to-hand combat. I help Marcus with security protocols. I'm building something that looks suspiciously like a life, and none of that would have happened if you hadn't taken the risk to love me despite the danger. Nathan wanted to argue, but she was right. In the 6 months since the confrontation with Alexei, Clara had integrated into his organization in ways he hadn't expected. She was brilliant at strategy, seeing patterns and vulnerabilities Nathan missed. She was patient with the younger members of his crew, teaching them not just how to fight but how to think tactically. And she'd brought something to Nathan's empire that had been missing before: humanity. The Southport deal closes today, Nathan said, changing the subject because emotion still made him uncomfortable. Biggest real estate acquisition in the organization's history. Completely legitimate, completely legal. Marcus thinks we can flip 3 of the properties within a year for a 30% profit. That's good. The more legitimate income, the less reliance on the other stuff. The other stuff was Clara's diplomatic way of referring to the criminal enterprises that still funded most of Nathan's operation. He'd been slowly transitioning, pulling back from protection rackets, shutting down the more violent operations, investing in real estate and legitimate businesses. It was a 5-year plan to go completely legal, and he was ahead of schedule. Clara had been the catalyst. She'd made him want something more than power for its own sake. She'd made him want a future where he could walk down Michigan Avenue without looking over his shoulder, where he could take her to dinner without worrying about who might be watching. I've been thinking, Clara said carefully, about what comes next. For us. Nathan's heart kicked. What about it? Your 5-year plan to go legitimate. My past slowly becoming less relevant as the Bratva's attention shifts to other problems. We're building towards something, Nathan. But I'm not sure what the end goal looks like. What do you want it to look like? Clara was quiet for a moment, watching the sun climb higher over the lake. Normal, boring even. I want to wake up next to you without checking for threats. I want to go grocery shopping and cook dinner and fight about whose turn it is to do laundry. She trailed off, vulnerability clear on her face. What? Nathan prompted gently. I want to teach again, like I planned before everything went wrong. I want to help kids learn, make a difference in some small way that isn't about violence. Nathan felt something expand in his chest. Then let's make that happen. Just like that? Just like that. Nathan turned to face her fully. Clara, I've spent 11 years building an empire I never wanted. I did it because I had to. Because people depended on me. Because it was expected. But the end game was always to get out. To become something else. You make me believe that's actually possible. Tears gathered in Clara's eyes. You really mean that? Yeah, I do. Nathan pulled her close, kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo. Something floral and ordinary and perfect. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to finish the 5-year plan in 3. We're going to build you a life where you can be Clara Mendez, teacher, instead of the ghost. And we're going to do it together, because I'm not doing any of this without you. Clara pulled back to look at him, and the love in her eyes was so intense it almost hurt. I don't deserve you. You deserve everything, Nathan said fiercely. You survived hell. You protected your sister's memory the only way you knew how. You did what you had to do. And now, you get to be more than that. We both do. They kissed as the sun rose fully, warming the balcony, chasing away the last shadows of night. It was tender and unhurried, the kiss of 2 people who finally believed they had a future to plan for, instead of just immediate danger to survive. When they broke apart, Nathan's phone was buzzing. He ignored it. That might be important, Clara said. You're more important. The phone kept buzzing. Finally, Nathan sighed and checked it. Marcus, calling urgently. This better be life or death, Nathan answered. Not death, but definitely life-changing. Marcus sounded excited, which was rare. The FBI just arrested Senator Clayton on corruption charges. Turns out he was the one feeding information to the Bratva about Clara's location. Nathan went very still. Senator Clayton was a mid-level Illinois politician Nathan had dealt with occasionally, exactly the kind of useful idiot who'd sell out anyone for the right price. How did the FBI figure it out? Nathan asked. Anonymous tip. Someone sent them a whole file of communication records, bank transfers, the works. Clayton was taking Bratva money to track federal informants and witnesses. Clara was just one name on a list. Nathan looked at Clara, who'd gone pale. Who sent the tip? Unknown. But I have a theory. Marcus paused. I think it was Alexei Volkov. What? Why would he help us? Not helping us. Helping himself. Clayton was a liability. Corrupt, sloppy, bound to get caught eventually. By burning him, Alexei eliminates a weak link and sends a message that he keeps his word. Remember what he said at the cannery? That Chicago was ours, and the ghost was ours. This is him following through. Nathan processed that. It made a twisted kind of sense. Honor among thieves. The old code his father had lived by. Alexei had lost the fight, accepted the terms, and was now ensuring those terms were honored. Tell the FBI we appreciate their diligence, Nathan said carefully, aware that this call might be monitored. And Marcus? Make sure our security protocols account for the fact that Volkov apparently has resources inside federal law enforcement. Already on it. Boss, this is good news. With Clayton gone, the last leak in Clara's protection is sealed. She's actually safe now. Safe. The word felt foreign but desperately wanted. Thanks, Marcus. We'll be in the office this afternoon. Nathan ended the call and pulled Clara into his arms. She was shaking, and he realized she was crying. Not from fear or pain, but from relief so profound it had nowhere else to go. It's over, she whispered against his chest. It's actually over. It's over, Nathan confirmed. You're free. They stood there as the city woke up around them, holding each other, letting the reality sink in. Clara was safe. The threat that had defined her existence for 3 years was gone. She could actually build the normal, boring life she'd described. They could build it together. 3 years later, Nathan stood at the back of a classroom in a Chicago public school, watching Clara teach American history to a room full of 8th graders. She was animated, passionate, making the Civil War come alive in a way that had even the troublemakers paying attention. She'd finished her teaching certification 18 months ago, gotten hired at this school a year back, and now she was exactly what she'd always wanted to be, Ms. Mendez, teacher, mentor, the adult who actually gave a damn about kids who desperately needed someone to care. Nathan had completed his transformation too. The criminal empire was gone, dismantled piece by piece, its assets folded into legitimate businesses or sold off. He was now Nathan Cross, real estate developer, investor, boring businessman who went to charity dinners and city council meetings. Marcus had retired to Florida with enough money to live comfortably for several lifetimes. Jimmy Bones was managing a gym on the south side, teaching kids to box instead of hiring them to fight. Tommy had become a trainer for mixed martial arts, his nose permanently crooked from Clara's knee but his pride intact. The old world had transformed into something new, something that looked a lot like redemption. The bell rang, and students flooded out of the classroom, shouting and laughing. Clara noticed Nathan, and her face lit up with a smile that still made his heart skip. "Hey, stranger," she said, walking over. "What brings you to my classroom?" Nathan held up a small box. "I had a question I needed to ask." Clara's breath caught. "Nathan." He opened the box, revealing a simple platinum ring with a single diamond. Nothing ostentatious, nothing that screamed mob money, just elegant and perfect, and exactly what Clara would want. "I know we've only been living normal lives for 3 years," Nathan said. "I know we're still figuring out who we are outside of survival and violence, but I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life figuring it out with you. So, Clara Mendez, teacher, former ghost, most complicated woman I've ever met, will you marry me?" Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling so wide it looked like it hurt. Yes, God, yes. Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger, and Clara launched herself at him, kissing him in her empty classroom with afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. It was messy and perfect, and everything they'd fought for. When they finally broke apart, Clara was laughing and crying simultaneously. "I can't believe this is real. That we're real. We're real," Nathan confirmed. "We earned it. Yeah, we did." They left the school hand in hand, walking out into Chicago Spring, the same city where they'd met, fought, bled, and loved. But now it felt different. Not a battleground, but a home. Not a prison, but a place full of possibility. The rain started as they reached Nathan's car. Not the harsh November rain from that first night at the Velvet Room, but gentle spring rain that smelled like new growth and fresh starts. Clara tilted her face up to it, letting the drops wash over her, and Nathan saw the ghost finally disappear completely, replaced by someone who'd learned to be human again. "I love you," Clara said, rain-soaked and radiant. "I love you too," Nathan replied. "My fierce, beautiful, formerly terrifying wife-to-be." Clara laughed. "I'm still a little terrifying." "Yeah, you are. I'm counting on it." They got in the car and drove home through rain-washed streets, toward a future neither of them had dared hope for 6 years ago, when a Mafia boss asked a poor girl to fight as a joke. He'd had no idea who she really was. Neither had she, until he'd helped her remember. Now they both knew. Clara was a survivor who'd learned to thrive. Nathan was a king who'd learned to be a man. And together, they were proof that even people forged in violence could choose peace, that ghosts could become human, and that love, real, messy, complicated love, was the most powerful force in any world, criminal or otherwise. The rain kept falling, washing away the last traces of who they'd been, and making space for who they were becoming. And for the first time in either of their lives, the future looked less like a threat, and more like a promise they were finally ready to keep. Thank you so much for following this story about Nathan and Clara. If you enjoyed their journey from darkness into light, I'd love to hear from you. Please subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories about redemption, love, and second chances. And let me know in the comments, what part of the world are you listening from? Your support means everything, and I can't wait to bring you the next story. Until then, take care of yourselves and the people you love.